When Kate Munro inherits a gold mine in a ruthless boomtown, a chilling message reveals her uncle's death wasn't an accident. With a quiet cowboy by her side, can she unearth the truth before the killers strike again? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun beat down on Bright Hollow, a dusty boomtown where fortunes were made and lost before noon. Catherine Munro, known to everyone as Kate, stood outside the lawyer's office, clutching a worn envelope. Her simple blue dress and practical boots marked her as different from the painted ladies at the saloon, but her straight posture and fierce eyes kept unwanted attention at bay. "Miss Munro, are you sure you understand what this means?" Mr. Peterson, the town lawyer, had followed her outside. His thin mustache twitched with concern. "Your uncle's claim is worth a small fortune." "I understand perfectly well, Mr. Peterson." Kate tucked a strand of brown hair behind her ear. "Uncle Frank left everything to me. The claim, the tools, the land, it's all mine now. But a lady such as yourself, a lady such as myself can read a deed as well as any man." She tapped the papers. "My father taught me how to read contracts. I know what I own." The lawyer sighed, looking around nervously. "Word travels fast in Bright Hollow. You should consider your options carefully. A woman alone with a gold mine is still a woman who can make her own decisions." Kate nodded firmly. "Good day, Mr. Peterson." As she walked away, she could feel eyes watching from every porch and window. Uncle Frank had been a hermit, living in his small cabin near the mine, coming to town only when necessary. His death 3 weeks ago, found at the bottom of a mine shaft with a broken neck, had been ruled an accident. But Kate had her doubts. Her small rented room above the general store wasn't much, but it was all she needed until she figured out what to do next. She locked the door behind her and sat on the bed, spreading out the papers. The gold nugget mine. According to Uncle Frank's ledger, he'd been pulling out enough gold to live comfortably, but not enough to draw attention. Until recently. His last entries showed veins richer than anything he'd seen before. A knock at the door startled her. "Miss Munro?" The booming voice belonged to Silas Morgan, owner of the largest saloon in town. "I'd like a word, if you please." Kate quickly gathered the papers and tucked them under her mattress before opening the door just a crack. "Mr. Morgan." She kept her voice steady. "What can I do for you?" The large man smiled, gold tooth glinting. "I heard about your uncle's passing. My condolences." "Thank you. I also heard he left you his claim." Morgan leaned against the doorframe. "I'd like to make you an offer, a fair price for the land. More money than a young lady like yourself could spend in a lifetime." "I'm not interested in selling," Kate said firmly. Morgan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mining is dangerous work, Miss Munro. No place for a woman. I could take that burden. It's off your hands. I appreciate your concern, but I can manage my own affairs." She began to close the door, but Morgan's hand shot out, keeping it open. "Think about it," he said, his voice lower now. "Accidents happen in mines all the time, just like what happened to your uncle." A chill ran down Kate's spine. "Good day, Mr. Morgan." She pushed the door closed and locked it, her heart pounding. The threat had been clear enough. By the end of the week, Kate had received 12 offers of marriage, 8 business proposals, and 3 thinly veiled threats. Every man in Bright Hollow, it seemed, had an idea about what she should do with her inheritance. Sheriff Wallace had suggested she sell to someone reputable before trouble found her. The banker, Mr. Collins, had offered to manage her affairs, with a knowing smile. Even the preacher had mentioned a nephew who would make a fine husband for a woman in her position. Kate stood outside the assay office, waiting for Mr. Roberts to finish examining the small pouch of gold she'd brought in, the last of what Uncle Frank had processed before his death. She needed to know its value before making any decisions. A shadow fell across her path and she tensed, expecting another unwanted proposal. Instead, a tall man in a worn cowboy hat simply nodded as he passed. "Ma'am," he said quietly, then continued. On his way, Kate watched him go, surprised. He didn't stop, didn't turn back, didn't make any offer or suggestion. In a town where every man suddenly had something to say to her, his silence was refreshing. "That's Luke Merrick," said a voice beside her. Josie Adams, who ran the boarding house, had come up to the assay office. "Keeps to himself, has a small place with a corral at the edge of town. Breaks horses mostly. I don't think we've met, Kate replied. So you wouldn't have. He doesn't come to town much, not one for the saloon or gossip. Josie smiled. Unlike the rest of these vultures circling you since Frank died. Kate sighed. Does everyone know my business? It's a small town, honey, and gold makes men stupid. Josie patted her arm. You be careful now. Not everyone asking for your hand is looking for a wife. Most just want what's under your land. That evening, Kate returned to her room, tired from another day of fending off unwanted attention. She was about to light her lamp when something caught her eye, a small package outside her door. Cautiously, she picked it up and brought it inside. It was a tin of coffee, good coffee, not the cheap stuff from the general store, and a folded tote. She opened it slowly, reading the neat handwriting. You don't need a man, but if you ever want a partner in peace, I mend fences. Luke Merrick. Kate read the note twice, trying to find the hidden angle, but there wasn't one. No offer to buy her land, no proposal of marriage, no promise of protection in exchange for gold, just coffee and a simple statement. For the first time since receiving news of her inheritance, Kate smiled. The next morning, she decided to visit Uncle Frank's cabin. She needed to see the mine for herself, to understand what she had inherited and what she was fighting for. She rented a horse from the livery stable, ignoring the stable master's warnings about a lady traveling alone. With her father's old pistol tucked into her saddlebag, she rode out of town following the rough map Uncle Frank had included with his will. After an hour's ride, she crested a small hill and saw the cabin below, nestled against the mountainside. Beside it, the dark opening of the mine shaft was visible, along with piles of equipment. As she approached, she noticed fresh hoofprints in the dirt. Someone had been here recently. Kate dismounted slowly, keeping her hand near her saddlebag. The cabin door was ajar, though she was certain it should have been locked. "Hello," she called out, drawing her pistol. "Anyone there?" Silence greeted her. She pushed the door open wider with her foot, pistol raised. The cabin had been ransacked. Uncle Frank's few possessions were scattered across the floor. The mattress had been slashed open, the small stove overturned. Someone had been looking for something. Kate stepped inside carefully, her eyes scanning for any clue to who had done this. On the rough wooden table, she found a playing card, the Ace of Spades, weighted down by a bullet. Another message, another threat. She quickly checked the rest of the cabin, but nothing else seemed disturbed. Whatever they had been looking for, they either found it or gave up. Outside, she surveyed the mine entrance. The wooden supports looked solid enough, but she wasn't about to go inside alone, not after what happened to Uncle Frank. As she was examining the equipment, the sound of approaching hooves made her spin around, pistol ready. A rider appeared over the hill. Even at a distance, she recognized the worn cowboy hat. Luke Merrick. He slowed his horse when he saw her, approaching cautiously, with his hands visible. "Miss Monroe," he called out. "Don't mean to intrude." Kate lowered her pistol slightly but kept it in hand. "Mr. Merrick, what brings you out here?" He dismounted, keeping his distance. "Saw you ride out of town. These hills can be dangerous for someone alone." "I can take care of myself," he nodded. "I believe that, but sometimes an extra pair of hands is useful." He glanced at the cabin door. "Trouble?" Someone broke in, looking for something. Luke frowned. "May I?" He gestured toward the cabin. Kate hesitated, then nodded. She followed him inside, watching as he surveyed the damage with narrowed eyes. "Professionals," he said, examining the slashed mattress. "Not just vandals." "How can you tell?" "They were thorough but focused. They wanted something specific." He picked up the playing card. "This is Morgan's calling card. He leaves it when he wants people to know he's watching." "You know Silas Morgan?" Luke's expression darkened. "Everyone in these parts knows Morgan. He's been buying up claims all over the county. Some sell willingly. Others need convincing. He offered to buy mine. I figured as much." Luke set the card down. "Your uncle refused to sell, even when Morgan offered top dollar." Kate looked at him curiously. "You knew my uncle?" "Not well. But I broke a horse for him last year. He mentioned finding a rich vein, said he was saving it for family." Luke met her eyes. He also mentioned being followed. A chill ran down Kate's spine. The sheriff said his death was an accident. Sheriff Wallace is in Morgan's. Park it. Luke looked around the cabin again. If you don't mind me asking, what are you planning to do with the mine? Kate tensed. Here it was, the real reason for his help. I haven't decided, she said carefully. To her surprise, Luke simply nodded. Fair enough, not my business. He gestured to the overturned stove. Let me help you set this place right before you head back to town. For the next hour, they worked together, cleaning the cabin. Luke righted the stove, repaired a broken chair, and helped Kate gather Uncle Frank's scattered belongings. Not once did he mention the gold or make any suggestion about what she should do with her inheritance. When they finished, Kate felt compelled to ask, "Why are you helping me, Mr. Merrick?" Luke paused at the door. "My ma raised me to help neighbors in need. Nothing more to it than that." "And the coffee? The note?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Figured you were tired of men telling you what to do. Thought you might appreciate some peace instead." He tipped his hat and stepped outside. "Sun's getting low, we should head back to town." As they rode side by side, Kate studied him from the corner of her eye. Luke Merrick was different from the other men in Bright Hollow. He didn't swagger or boast. His clothes were worn but clean, his manner quiet but confident. "Mr. Merrick," she said as they neared town, "thank you for your help today." "Luke," he corrected gently. "And you're welcome, Miss Monroe." "Kate," she offered in return. They parted ways at the edge of town, Luke heading toward his corral, Kate continuing to the livery stable. She couldn't help but notice how different her reception was compared to the morning. Men who had been eager to approach her now kept their distance, eyeing her warily. Word had gotten around that Luke Merrick had ridden out with her. And for some reason that seemed to matter. Back in her room, Kate found another visitor waiting. This time it was Josie Adams. "I brought you some supper," the older woman said, setting down a covered plate. "And some advice, if you'll take." "Thank you." Kate gestured for her to sit. "I could use some friendly counsel." Josie settled onto the room's only chair. "I saw you ride in with Luke Merrick. He helped me at the cabin. Someone broke in. Morgan's men, I'd wager." Josie shook her head. "That man won't stop until he owns every claim in the county. Why is he so determined to have my uncle's mine?" "Because Frank hit the mother lode, honey. Everyone knows it." Josie leaned forward. 2 days before he died, your uncle came to town for supplies. He was drunk, not his usual way, and told anyone who'd listen that he'd struck a vein richer than anything in the territory. Kate frowned. "That doesn't sound like Uncle Frank." It wasn't. "That's why some of us think he was forced to say it. To draw attention." Josie sighed. "The next thing we heard, he was dead at the bottom of his mine shaft." "You think he was murdered?" "I think men kill for less than what's in that mine." Josie's eyes were serious. "Which brings me to Luke Merrick." Kate tensed. "What about him?" "He's a good man, one of the few around here. But getting close to you puts a target on his back too." "We're not close," Kate protested. "He just helped me today." Josie smiled knowingly. "In Bright Hollow, that's enough to start rumors. And Morgan doesn't like competition." After Josie left, Kate paced her small room thinking she needed to see the inside of the mine to know exactly what Uncle Frank had discovered. But she couldn't do it alone. She pulled out the note Luke had left with the coffee. "A partner in peace," he had written. Maybe what she needed now wasn't peace, but a partner she could trust. The next morning, Kate made her way to the edge of town, where Luke's small property sat apart from the others. A corral held 3 horses, and a modest cabin stood nearby, smoke rising from its chimney. Luke was mending a saddle on the porch when she approached. He looked up, surprise crossing his features. "Miss Monroe," he said, setting aside his work. "Kate, I need your help," she said without preamble. "I need to see inside the mine." Luke studied her for a moment. "That's dangerous work." "I know, but I need to understand what I'm fighting for." She met his gaze steadily. "I'll pay you for your time. I don't want your money." He stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "But I want to be clear about something. That mine has already got one person killed. Probably your uncle. You believe he was murdered too?" Luke nodded. Frank knew mines. He wouldn't have had an accident like that. Kate took a deep breath. Then help me find out what happened to him. Help me see what he discovered. Morgan won't like it. I don't care what Morgan likes. Kate's eyes flashed with determination. This is my inheritance, my responsibility. Luke looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. We'll need supplies, lanterns, rope. He glanced at her dress. And I need different clothes. 2 hours later, they were ready. Kate wore a pair of old trousers and a shirt Luke had lent her, rolled up at the sleeves and cinched with her own belt. They had packed tools, food and water, planning to spend the full day exploring the mine. As they rode out of town, Kate noticed a man watching from the saloon porch. Even at a distance, she could see Silas Morgan's frown. "We're being watched," she murmured. Luke nodded. "We probably will be followed too, but I know these hills better than Morgan's men. We'll lose them before we reach the mine." True to his word, Luke led them on a winding path through the hills, doubling back several times until he was satisfied. They weren't being tracked. When they reached the cabin, everything was as they had left it the day before. Luke secured the horses while Kate gathered the lanterns and tools. At the mine entrance, Luke paused. "Stay close to me. Step where I step, and if I say run, you run, no questions." Kate nodded, swallowing her nervousness. "I'm ready." The mine shaft was cool and damp, the air heavy with the smell of earth and minerals. Their lanterns cast long shadows against the rough walls as they moved deeper into the mountain. "Your uncle knew what he was doing," Luke commented, examining the support beams. "These are solid." They followed the main shaft for several hundred feet before reaching a fork. Luke studied both passages. "The right one looks more recent," he observed. "See the fresh tool marks?" They took the right passage, which sloped gently downward. After another 100 feet, the tunnel widened into a small chamber. Luke held his lantern higher, illuminating the walls. "My God," Kate whispered. "Gold. Veins of it, thick as her wrist, running through the rock face. Even in the dim lantern light it gleamed, rich and unmistakable. "I've never seen anything like it," Luke said softly. "Your uncle wasn't exaggerating. This is the mother lode." Kate reached out, touching the cold metal embedded in the stone. "This is what got him killed, and what Morgan's willing to kill for." Luke moved his lantern along the wall, following the vein. "This doesn't just run through this chamber. It goes deeper. The whole mountain could be laced with it." Kate felt a weight settle on her shoulders. "What am I supposed to do with this, Luke? I'm not a miner. I can't work this claim myself." "You have options," he said. "You could hire men to work it for you. Form a company." "With what money, and who would I trust?" Luke nodded, understanding her dilemma. "You could sell it, not to Morgan, but to one of the mining companies from San Francisco. And let them strip the mountain bare?" Kate shook her head. Uncle Frank loved this land. He wouldn't want that. They continued exploring, mapping the extent of the gold veins. In one narrow passage, Luke discovered a small pile of rocks that looked recently disturbed. "This doesn't look right," he said, kneeling to examine it. Carefully, he moved the rocks aside, revealing a metal box buried beneath. He lifted it out, brushing off the dirt. "It's locked," he said, handing it to Kate. "But it might be what Morgan's men were looking for." The box was heavy for its size, about the dimensions of a large book. Kate turned it over in her hands, but there was no key or obvious way to open it. "We should take this back with us," she decided. "Figure out how to open it somewhere safer." As they were preparing to leave, a distant sound echoed through the tunnel, the whinny of a horse. Luke immediately extinguished his lantern. "Someone's here," he whispered, taking Kate's lantern and putting it out too. "This way." In the pitch darkness, he took her hand, leading her down a side passage she hadn't noticed before. They moved quietly, feeling their way along the rough walls. Behind them, voices echoed in the main chamber. "They've been here," a man said. "The lanterns are still warm." "Search the place," ordered another voice, one Kate recognized as Silas Morgan's. "Find that box. It has to be here somewhere." Luke squeezed Kate's hand, urging her forward. The side passage was narrow, barely, wide enough for them to pass through single file. After several tense minutes of creeping through the darkness, Kate felt a cool breeze on her face. "There's another exit," Luke whispered. "Your uncle was smarter than they gave him credit for." The passage ended in a small opening, hidden by brush, and barely large enough for a person to crawl through. Luke went first, then helped Kate out. They emerged on the other side of the hill, out of sight of the cabin and the main mine entrance. "We need to move fast," Luke said, orienting himself. "Our horses are back at the cabin, but Morgan's men will find them soon." "What about the box?" Kate clutched it to her chest. "Keep it close. Whatever's inside, Morgan wants it badly." They made their way through the underbrush, circling around toward the road. Luke's plan was to head for the neighboring claim, owned by an old prospector named Jenkins who owed him a favor. As they reached the road, the sound of galloping horses approached from the direction of the cabin. "Down!" Luke pulled Kate into the ditch beside the road, covering her with his body as riders passed. "They're checking the road," he whispered once they had gone. "They know we're on foot." Kate's heart pounded in her ears. "What do we do?" Luke looked around, thinking quickly. "There's a hunting cabin about 2 miles east. We can shelter there until dark, then make our way to Jenkins's place." The trek through the hills was difficult, especially carrying the metal box. By the time they reached the small hunting cabin, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The cabin was little more than a shack, one room with a dirt floor and a small stone fireplace. But it was shelter, and it was hidden from the road. Luke checked to make sure it was empty, then ushered Kate inside. "We should be safe here for now." Kate set the box down on a rough wooden table, the only furniture besides a narrow cot. "Do you think we can open it?" Luke examined the lock. "Maybe. Let me check if there are any tools here." While he searched the cabin, Kate sank onto the cot, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The events of the day, the discovery of the gold, the chase through the mine, their narrow escape, it all crashed down on her at once. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. "Really? And don't say it's just being neighborly." Luke paused in his search, looking at her. "Would you believe me if I said I admired your spirit?" "Not entirely, no." A small smile touched his lips. "Fair enough." He sat down beside her on the cot. "The truth is, I've watched Morgan destroy too many lives in this territory. He buys people out or runs them off, or worse, he's got the sheriff in his pocket, the banker too. Nobody stands up to him." "Until now," Kate said softly. "Until now." Luke nodded. "When I heard what your uncle found and then how he died, I knew Morgan was behind it. And when I saw you standing outside that assay office, looking like you'd fight the whole town if you had to," he shrugged, "I figured you deserved a fair chance, but not the gold. You don't want a piece of the mine?" Luke shook his head. "I've seen what gold does to people, how it changes them. I'm content with my horses and my land." Kate studied his face in the fading light, looking for any sign of deception, but all she saw was honesty in his steady gaze. "I don't know who to trust." "In this town," she admitted, "everyone wants something from me." "What do you want, Kate?" Luke asked quietly. "Not what your uncle would want or what the town expects. What do you want to do with that mine?" It was a question no one else had bothered to ask her. Kate looked down at her hands, thinking. "I want to use it well," she said finally. "Not just for profit, but to build something lasting, something good." She looked up at him. "Is that foolish?" "No," Luke said. "That's brave." Outside, the last light faded from the sky, leaving them in darkness. Luke moved to the fireplace, careful not to make too much smoke that might give away their position. As a small fire cast its glow around the cabin, Kate turned her attention back to the metal box. The lock was sturdy, but the hinges looked less so. "What if we try the hinges instead of the lock?" she suggested. Luke nodded approvingly. Smart thinking. With a knife he found in the cabin, Luke carefully worked at the hinges until they gave way. The lid lifted, revealing the box's contents. Inside was a leather-bound journal, a small pouch, and a folded piece of paper sealed with wax. Kate opened the journal first. It was Uncle Frank's diary, filled with entries dating back several years. She flipped to the last pages. "Listen to this," she said, reading aloud. "March 15th. Found the big vein today. Bigger than anything I've seen. But I'm not the only one. Who knows? Morgan's men have been watching, got to hide the real ledger. If anything happens to me, Kate will know what to do. The real ledger. Luke frowned. What does that mean? Kate broke the seal on the folded paper. It was a map showing not just Uncle Frank's claim, but a much larger area. It's a survey map, she said, studying it. Look at these markings. The gold vein doesn't just run through Uncle Frank's mine. It extends under half the county, including Morgan's properties, Luke realized. But Morgan doesn't know that yet. This is why Uncle Frank was killed, Kate said softly. Not just for his claim, but for this knowledge. She opened the small pouch next. Inside was a key and a slip of paper with an address in Sacramento. Bank of Sacramento, she read. Safe deposit box 412. He must have stored the real records there, away from Bright Hollow. Luke whistled low. Your uncle was a careful man, and now I understand why. Kate looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the firelight. This information is worth more than the gold itself. It's leverage. Dangerous leverage, Luke warned. Morgan would kill for this. He already has. Kate closed the box. Which is why I can't let him get away with it. As they sat in the dim light of the hunting cabin, Kate felt a resolve hardening within her. Uncle Frank had trusted her with this inheritance, not just the gold, but the truth. And she would not waste it. Luke watched her, a quiet admiration in his eyes. Whatever you decide to do, Kate, you won't have to do it alone. For the first time since arriving in Bright Hollow, Kate felt something other than fear or suspicion, a warmth that had nothing to do with the small fire before them. Thank you, Luke, she said softly, for being the one man in this town who... I didn't try to take what wasn't offered. Outside, the night grew deeper. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, new decisions. But for now, in this small cabin hidden in the hills, Kate Monroe had found something unexpected. Not just a partner in peace, but perhaps a partner in fire as well. And that was a kind of gold worth fighting for. The morning sun filtered through the cracks in the hunting cabin's walls, waking Kate from a fitful sleep. She sat up on the narrow cot, momentarily disoriented before remembering the events of the previous day. The gold mine, the chase, the hidden box with its secrets. Luke was already awake, standing by the small window, keeping watch. Kate, no. Luke's voice called out behind her, but she was already moving. Morgan saw her coming and raised his pistol. The shot went wide as Turner's man fired, forcing Morgan to duck. He kicked his horse into motion, but Kate was close enough to grab the reins. The horse reared, nearly throwing Morgan from the saddle. He swung his pistol down, aiming at Kate's head. A shot rang out. Morgan jerked backward, a look of surprise, crossing his face as blood bloomed on his shoulder. He lost his grip and tumbled from the horse. Kate whirled around to see Luke standing with a smoking pistol. Nobody threatens what's mine, he said, his voice hard as steel. Morgan struggled to his knees, his good hand reaching for his dropped weapon. This isn't over, he growled. Yes, it is. Turner appeared from the shadows, his own pistol trained on Morgan. Silas Morgan, you're under arrest for the murder of Frank Monroe, attempted murder, claim jumping, and a dozen other charges I can think of. You have no authority here, Morgan spat. Turner smiled coldly. Actually, I do. He pulled a badge from inside his coat. Special Deputy, U.S. Marshal's Office. Been investigating you for months. Just needed the right evidence. He nodded to Kate. Which Miss Monroe here provided. Morgan's face twisted with rage and disbelief as Turner's men moved in to secure him. Luke hurried to Kate's side. Are you all right? That was a damn fool thing to do, running after him like that. I couldn't let him escape, she said, suddenly aware of how close she'd come to being shot. Not after what he did to Uncle Frank. Luke's expression softened. He reached out, touching her cheek gently. I understand, but next time let me handle the shooting. Next time? Kate raised an eyebrow. You planning on more shootouts, Mr. Merrick? A smile tugged at his lips. With you around, seems likely. Turner approached them, holstering his weapon. Morgan's men are surrendering. We've got them all, including the sheriff. He was hiding in the trees, waiting to see which way the wind blew. What happens now? Kate asked. Morgan goes to trial. With the evidence we have, plus Jenkins's testimony and those documents from Sacramento, he'll hang for your uncle's murder. Turner looked around at the mine. As for this place, it's legally yours, Miss Monroe. What you do with it is your business. Kate looked at the dark opening of the mine, thinking of the gold within and all the blood that had been spilled because of it. "Our business," she corrected, glancing at Luke. "If you're still interested in a partnership." Luke's eyes held hers. "What kind of partnership did you have in mind?" Before she could answer, Jenkins hobbled over, looking battered but triumphant. "How you did it, girl. You stood up to Morgan and won." Kate smiled at the old miner. "We all did, and now we need to decide what comes next." Dawn was breaking by the time Morgan and his men were secured and preparations made to transport them to Carson City for trial. Turner's men had set up camp around the mine, establishing a protective perimeter. Luke found Kate sitting on a rock overlooking the valley, watching the sunrise paint the hills in gold and pink. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, sitting beside her. "Yes," she agreed. Hard to believe so much ugliness happened here. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Luke spoke again. "About that partnership," he began hesitantly. "I'm not much for mining, but I know horses. Was thinking of expanding my corral, breeding stock instead of just breaking them." "That sounds like a good plan," Kate said. "The mine could fund it." Luke turned to face her. "Is that what you want, to stay here and run the mine?" Kate considered the question. "I want to honor Uncle Frank's wishes. Use the gold for something good." She looked at Luke. "But I also want more than gold in my life." "Like what?" His voice was soft, his eyes searching hers. "Like a partner," she said simply. "Someone who sees me, not just what I own." Luke's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with her own. "I've been seeing you since that first day outside the assay office, standing there like you could take on the whole world if you had to." "I almost had to," she said with a small smile. "But I didn't have to do it alone." "You never will," he promised. "Not as long as I'm around." Kate leaned her head against his shoulder, watching as the new day dawned over Bright Hollow. There would be decisions to make, plans to formulate, a future to build. But for now, in this moment, she had found something more valuable than any. Gold vein. She had found a partner in fire. And that was worth fighting for. "Any sign of Morgan's men?" she asked, smoothing her hair back. "They passed by about an hour ago," he replied. "Heading back to town, I think. But they'll be back with more men." Kate reached for the metal box, checking that its contents were still secure. "We need to get to Sacramento. That's where Uncle Frank kept the real ledger." "That's a 3-day journey," Luke pointed out. "And we can't go back to town for supplies without risking Morgan spotting us." "What about your friend Jenkins, the one with the neighboring claim?" Luke nodded. "He's our best bet. His place is about 4 miles east of here. If we're careful, we can make it there without using the main road." They set out as soon as they could, staying to the cover of trees and ravines, avoiding open ground. The metal box was heavy, and they took turns carrying it. "Tell me about yourself," Kate said as they walked. "How does a man like you end up in a place like Bright Hollow?" Luke smiled slightly. "Nothing special to tell. Grew up on a ranch in Colorado. My pa died when I was 16, and the bank took our land. Ma passed a year later. I've been drifting since, working with horses wherever I can. And you never wanted more? Gold or land of your own?" "Land, yes, someday." His eyes scanned the horizon as he spoke. "A place where horses can run free. But gold?" He shook his head. "I've seen too many men lose themselves chasing yellow dust." They walked in comfortable silence for a while before Kate spoke again. "I came to Bright Hollow to start fresh," she said. "My parents died in a fire 2 years ago. Uncle Frank was my only family left. I hardly knew him, but he wrote to me, offered me a place to stay." "I'm sorry about your folks," Luke said quietly. "Thank you." Kate stepped carefully over a fallen log. "The strange thing is, in his letter, Uncle Frank mentioned having something important to show me when I arrived. I wonder if he already knew." "Say about the gold vein, then?" "Probably. From his journal entries, he'd been tracking it for some time. And now Morgan wants it all for himself." Kate's voice hardened. "I won't let him get away with murder." Luke gave her a concerned look. "Be careful." "Kate, men like Morgan don't play by any rules." "Neither do I," she replied with a determined glint in her eye. By midday they reached Jenkins's claim. Unlike Uncle Frank's well-maintained mine, Jenkins's place looked half abandoned. A small shack leaned precariously near a mine entrance that was partially collapsed. Luke approached cautiously. "Jenkins, it's Luke Merrick." The door creaked open and an old man with a wild white beard peered out, a shotgun in his hands. "Merrick, what in tarnation are you doing here?" His eyes shifted to Kate. "And who's the lady?" "This is Catherine Monroe, Frank Monroe's niece. We need your help, Jenkins." The old man squinted at Kate, then lowered his shotgun. "Frank's niece, eh? Heard he passed. Sorry for your loss, miss. He was a good man." "Thank you," Kate said. "Did you know him well?" "Well enough. We'd share a drink now and then." Jenkins stepped back, gesturing for them to enter. "Come on in. Saint much, but it's safer than standing out here in the open." Inside, the shack was cluttered but clean. Maps and mining tools covered one wall, while a small stove and cot occupied the other. "Morgan's men are after us," Luke explained, setting down the metal box. "They're trying to take Kate's claim by force." Jenkins spat on the floor. "Morgan's been trying to buy me out for years, offered me pennies for what's worth dollars. I told him he could have my claim when they put me in the ground." He looked at Kate. "What's he after with your uncle's mine?" Kate hesitated, glancing at Luke, who nodded encouragingly. "Uncle Frank found a major gold vein," she said. "But there's more to it than that." She opened the metal box and showed Jenkins the map. "According to this, the vein runs under half the county, including parts Morgan already owns." Jenkins's eyes widened. "Well, I'll be damned." He studied the map carefully. "Frank always said he was sitting on something big. Never thought it was this big. We need to get to Sacramento," Luke said. "Frank left important documents there." "And then what?" Jenkins asked. Kate straightened her shoulders. "Then I fight for what's mine." The old miner chuckled. "You're Frank's blood, all right, stubborn as a mule." He stroked his beard thoughtfully. "I've got a wagon out back. Not much to look at, but it'll get you to the main road. From there you can catch the stage to Sacramento. Morgan will have men watching the stage," Luke pointed out. "Not if you take the night stage from Riverton," Jenkins countered. "It's 10 miles north, but Morgan doesn't have as much influence there." "We'll need different clothes," Kate said, looking down at her borrowed men's attire. "And I should cut my hair. They'll be looking for a woman with long brown hair." Luke looked surprised. "You'd cut your hair?" Kate met his gaze steadily. "I'd do a lot more than that to see justice done." Jenkins grinned. "I like her spirit, Merrick. You best hold on to this one." Luke's cheeks colored slightly. "It's not like that, Jenkins." "Sure it ain't," the old man winked. "I've got some clothes my daughter left behind last time she visited. Might fit you, miss. And I'm fair hand with scissors if you want that haircut." An hour later, Kate looked at her reflection in Jenkins's cracked mirror. Her long brown locks were gone, replaced by a short style that barely reached her chin. With Jenkins's daughter's dress and bonnet, she looked completely different. "They'll be looking for a woman traveling with a man," Luke said. "But a mother and son won't draw attention." "Mother and son?" Kate raised an eyebrow. Luke grinned. "With a bit of flour in my hair and a stoop to my walk, I can pass for a young man escorting his elderly mother." Jenkins laughed. "Elderly?" "The lady can't be more than 25. 26, Kate corrected with a small smile. "But I can act older if needed." They set out at dusk in Jenkins's wagon, the metal box hidden under a pile of old blankets. The old miner had given them food, water, and a small pistol to add to the one Kate already carried. "Good luck to you both," he said as they departed. "And when you get back, let me know what you find in Sacramento. I might want to renegotiate with Morgan myself." The road to Riverton was rough but quiet. They passed only one other traveler, a peddler heading south who barely gave them a glance. "Do you think this will work?" Kate asked as the lights of Riverton came into view. "It has to," Luke replied. "Once we have the ledger from Sacramento, we'll have leverage against Morgan." The night stage was scheduled to leave at 9 o'clock. They arrived with just enough time to purchase tickets and board. Luke had indeed transformed himself, with flour dusting his hair and a worn blanket draped over his shoulders to disguise his build. He walked with a convincing stoop, leaning on a stick Jenkins had provided. Kate played her part as the concerned mother, fussing over him as they boarded the stage. "Mind your step, Thomas," she said loudly. "Your rheumatism will act up if you're not careful." The other passengers, a traveling salesman and an elderly couple, paid them little attention as the stage lurched forward. They traveled through the night, the rocking motion of the stage eventually lulling the other passengers to sleep. Kate remained vigilant, one hand near her hidden pistol, the other protectively on the bundle containing the metal box. Luke leaned close, dropping his elderly voice to whisper, "You're good at this." At what? Acting. Adapting. His eyes, still sharp despite his disguise, studied her face. "Most people would have sold that mine by now and run. I'm not most people." "No," he agreed softly. "You certainly aren't." The stage made several stops along the way, but no one who boarded seemed suspicious. By dawn, they were well on their way to Sacramento, the mountains of Bright Hollow fading into the distance behind them. Kate dozed fitfully, her head occasionally dropping onto Luke's shoulder. Despite the danger, despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, she felt strangely secure with him beside her. They reached Sacramento late the following afternoon. The city was larger and busier than Bright Hollow, with paved streets and brick buildings replacing the dusty roads and wooden structures of the mining town. "We should find a place to stay," Luke said as they disembarked. "The bank will be closed until morning." They found a modest hotel near the bank, booking 2 adjoining rooms under their assumed names. The clerk barely looked up from his ledger as he handed them the keys. In the privacy of her room, Kate finally allowed herself to relax slightly. She washed the dust of travel from her face and changed into the spare dress Jenkins's daughter had provided. A knock at the connecting door announced Luke, who had likewise cleaned up and removed the flour from his hair. "Are you all right?" he asked, standing in the doorway. "Just tired," she admitted, "and worried about what we might find tomorrow." "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Kate smiled gratefully. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad you left that coffee on my doorstep, Luke Merrick." A soft smile crossed his face. "So am I." The Bank of Sacramento was an imposing structure of marble and brass. Kate and Luke entered as soon as it opened, approaching the teller with confidence. "I'd like to access safe deposit box 412, Kate said, producing the key from the pouch. "My name is Catherine Monroe. My uncle, Frank Monroe, authorized me as a co-owner." The teller examined the key, then consulted a large ledger. "Yes, Miss Monroe, I'll need to see some identification." Kate presented the papers from Uncle Frank's will, which thankfully she had kept with her rather than leaving at her room in Bright Hollow. "Everything seems to be in order," the teller said. "Please follow me." They were led to a private room where the safe deposit box was brought to them. When the teller left, Kate inserted the key with trembling fingers. Inside the box was a leather portfolio, thick with documents, and another small pouch. Kate opened the portfolio first, spreading the papers on the table. "These are mineral survey reports," she said, examining them. "And legal documents, land deeds." Luke leaned over her shoulder. "Look at this one. It's a deed for the water rights to Half Moon Creek." Half Moon Creek runs through Morgan's properties, Kate realized. Uncle Frank owned the water rights? "And according to this," Luke said, pointing to another document, "he filed mining claims on 3 sections of land adjacent to Morgan's biggest holdings. All places where the gold vein runs according to his map." Kate opened the pouch next. Inside was a heavy gold pocket watch and a letter addressed to her. She unfolded the letter with care, recognizing Uncle Frank's handwriting. "My dear Kate," she read aloud, "if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you've found your way to the truth. The gold is real, more than enough to set you up for life. But be careful. Silas Morgan has been trying to consolidate power in Bright Hollow for years. He doesn't just want the gold, he wants control. The documents in this box are your protection. Morgan needs the water rights to operate his mines efficiently. Without them, his operations will suffer. Use this as leverage if you must. But remember, gold changes people. Don't let it change you. I've seen how you stand up for yourself, how you think for yourself. That's worth more than any vein of ore. Whatever you decide to do it because it's right, not because it's easy or profitable. Your loving Uncle Frank." Tears welled in Kate's eyes as she finished reading. Uncle Frank had known the danger he was in, had prepared for it, had trusted her to carry on. "He knew Morgan might come after him," she said softly. Luke placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "And he trusted you to handle it. He was right to." Kate wiped her eyes, determination replacing grief. These documents change everything. Morgan can't touch my claim without risking his own operations. It's more than that, Luke said, examining the survey reports. With these filings, Frank effectively blocked Morgan from accessing parts of the gold vein that run under his own land. He can't mine it properly without encroaching on your uncle's claims. So that's why he was so desperate to get the box, Kate mused. Without these documents, no one would know Uncle Frank had legal rights to those areas. And with Frank gone, Morgan probably thought he could just take over without anyone being the wiser. Until I showed up. Kate gathered the documents carefully. We need to take these to the Territorial Land Office to verify they're properly recorded. Then we need to get back to Bright Hollow. It won't be safe, Luke warned. Morgan will be even more dangerous once he realizes what we have. I'm counting on it, Kate replied with a determined gleam in her eye. They spent the rest of the day at the Territorial Land Office, confirming that all of Uncle Frank's claims were properly filed and legally binding. The clerk provided certified copies of each document, which Kate stored safely in the leather portfolio. There's one more thing we should do while we're here, Luke suggested as they left the land office. Send a telegram to the federal marshal in Carson City. Report your uncle's murder and Morgan's threats. Will they believe us? Maybe not right away, but it puts them on notice. And if anything happens to us, they'll know where to start looking. Kate nodded. Good thinking. And I want to send a telegram to Josie Adams too. Let her know we're all right and heading back soon. At the telegraph office, they sent their messages, careful to word them in a way that wouldn't reveal too much if intercepted. Now what? Kate asked as they stepped back onto the street. Now we go back and face Morgan, Luke said, but not alone. He led her to a different part of town, where the buildings were less impressive and the people rougher around the edges. They stopped outside a building with a sign reading, Carson Mining Company. A friend of mine works here, Luke explained. Jacob Turner. He used to be a lawman before he went into the mining business. He's honest and he hates Morgan almost as much as we do. Inside, they were directed to an office at the back. Jacob Turner was a large man with a bushy beard and intelligent eyes. He rose from his desk when they entered. Luke Merrick, he boomed. It's been a dog's age. What brings you to Sacramento? Luke quickly introduced Kate and explained their situation. Turner listened intently, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. Morgan's been a thorn in the side of legitimate mining operations for years, Turner said when they finished. He uses intimidation and bribery to get what he wants. I'd be more than happy to help put him in his place. We need protection, Luke said, and possibly legal help if Morgan tries to challenge the claims. Turner nodded. I can provide both. My company has an interest in expanding into that region. Anyway, we could form a partnership with Miss Monroe that would be beneficial to all parties. Kate eyed him cautiously. What kind of partnership? A fair one, Turner assured her. You maintain ownership of your claims. We provide the expertise and equipment to mine them properly. We split the profits 50-50, and we handle Morgan. Together. I'd need to see that in writing, Kate said. Turner smiled approvingly. Of course, I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers right away. In the meantime, I can spare 4 of my best men to escort you back to Bright Hollow. Luke and Kate exchanged glances. It seemed almost too good to be true. Why are you willing to help us? Kate asked directly. Turner leaned back in his chair. 3 reasons. First, Luke once saved my life during a mine collapse. I owe him. Second, I've been looking for a way to break Morgan's monopoly in that region for years. And third, his eyes twinkled, the gold vein you're sitting on could make us all very wealthy if handled properly. At least he's honest about his motives, Luke murmured to Kate. She nodded slightly. I'll consider your offer, Mr. Turner, but I want to be clear about something. Justice for my uncle comes first. Before profit, before anything else. I understand, Turner said solemnly, and I respect that. Morgan crossed a line when he resorted to murder. He needs to answer for that. By evening, Turner had arranged for 4 armed men to accompany them back to Bright Hollow. The partnership agreement was drawn up, reviewed by an independent lawyer at Kate's insistence, and signed by both parties. We'll leave at first light, Turner informed them. My men will travel as mining consultants inspecting new territories, less suspicious that way. Back at the hotel, Kate paced her room, reviewing the events of the past few days. Everything had moved so quickly, from inheriting a gold mine to uncovering a murderous plot to forming a business partnership with a mining company. Luke watched her from the doorway of the connecting room. "Having second thoughts?" "Not second thoughts," she said. "Just wondering if I'm doing what Uncle Frank would have wanted. From his letter, I'd say he wanted you to do what you thought was right." Luke stepped into the room. "Do you trust Turner?" "About as much as I trust any businessman," Kate replied with a small smile. "But his offer is fair and we need the support." Luke nodded. "For what it's worth, Jacob Turner is one of the few honest men I've met in the mining business. If he gives his word, he keeps it." Kate stopped pacing and turned to face him. "And what about you, Luke? Where do you fit into all this once we get back to Bright Hollow?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "I hadn't really thought about it. I just wanted to help you get justice. And after that?" A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. "After that," Luke said finally, his voice soft. "I suppose that depends on what you want." Kate took a step closer to him. "You're the only person who's ever asked. Hand me that." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the air between them. Luke reached out, tentatively touching her cheek. "Kate," he began, but a knock at the door interrupted whatever he had been about to say. It was one of Turner's men delivering a final message about their departure time in the morning. By the time Kate turned back, the moment had passed and Luke was bidding her good night. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." Alone in her room, Kate touched her cheek where Luke's fingers had been. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond the gold mine and Morgan's threats. A future where she wasn't fighting for survival or justice, but building something new. Something with Luke, perhaps. But first, they had to survive the return to Bright Hollow. The journey back was tense but uneventful. Turner's men were professional and vigilant, keeping a constant watch for any sign of Morgan's influence. They traveled by private coach rather than the public stage, taking a less direct route to avoid potential ambushes. As they neared Bright Hollow, Kate felt her anxiety rising. The familiar hills and winding roads no longer seemed welcoming, but fraught with danger. "We'll stop at Jenkins's place first," Luke suggested. "Get the lay of the land before going into town," Turner agreed. "Smart move. My men can scout the area, see if Morgan's got people watching the roads." Jenkins was surprised but pleased to see them return with reinforcements. "Been worried about you two," he admitted. "Morgan's men have been all over these hills the past few days. Tore apart your uncle's cabin looking for something." "Did they bother you?" Kate asked with concern. The old miner spat. "Tried to. I greeted them with my shotgun. They didn't stay long." Luke grinned. "That's why I like you, Jenkins." Turner sent 2 of his men to scout the town while the others set up a temporary camp at Jenkins's claim. By nightfall, the scouts returned with troubling news. "Morgan's got men posted at all entrances to town," one reported. "And there's talk that he's filed a claim jumper's complaint against Miss Monroe. Says she abandoned her claim when she left town." "That's ridiculous," Kate protested. "I've been gone less than a week." "Doesn't matter," Turner said grimly. "In these parts, if you're not actively working a claim, someone can challenge it, especially if they have the sheriff in their pocket. So, what do we do?" Luke asked. Turner stroked his beard thoughtfully. "We need to get Miss Monroe back on her claim as soon as possible. Establish a visible presence, and then we need to confront Morgan directly, with the documents as leverage." "I should go into town first," Kate decided. "See Josie Adams. Find out exactly what Morgan's been saying." "Too dangerous," Luke objected. "Morgan's men will be watching for you." "Not like this, they won't." Kate touched her short hair. "Besides, I'll go after dark. Josie's boarding house is on the edge of town." Despite Luke's concerns, the plan was set. Kate would go into town disguised as a young woman looking for lodging, while Turner's men established a presence at the mine. Luke would accompany Kate, but remain outside town as backup. As dusk fell, Kate prepared to leave. She wore the simple dress and bonnet, with a shawl covering her distinctive short hair. "Be careful," Luke said as he helped her onto Jenkins's wagon. "If anything seems wrong, anything at all, you get out of there." "I will," she promised. "Meet me at the old oak by the creek in 2 hours." The ride into town was tense, every shadow on the road seeming to hold a potential threat. But Kate reached Josie's boarding house without incident, slipping in through the back door as arranged in their telegram. Josie was waiting, her weathered face lighting up when she saw Kate. "Thank the Lord," she said, pulling Kate into a fierce hug. "I was worried sick when you disappeared." Inside her private quarters, Josie filled Kate in on what had been happening in town. "Morgan's been telling everyone you ran off with the deed to the mine," she said. "Says you're a fraud, that Frank never meant to leave everything to you. He's got the sheriff ready to arrest you for claim jumping if you show your face." "What to?" "About Luke," Kate asked. "Has anyone been looking for him?" Josie nodded grimly. "Morgan's offering a reward for information on his whereabouts. Claims he kidnapped you." "That's absurd." "Of course it is, but Morgan's got most folks too scared to question his version of events." Josie poured them both cups of tea. "Now tell me what you found in Sacramento." Kate explained about the water rights and mining claims, watching Josie's eyes widen in surprise. "Frank, you old fox," the older woman chuckled. "He outmaneuvered Morgan after all." "But we still have to prove it," Kate pointed out. "And Morgan has the sheriff on his side." "Not just the sheriff," Josie said, lowering her voice. "There's a rumor Morgan's bringing in hired guns from Carson City, professional killers, not just the usual roughnecks." Kate's blood ran cold. "When?" "They're due on tomorrow's stage. This changed things. They couldn't afford to wait or to be cautious." "I need to get back to Luke," Kate said, rising. "We need to move tonight." Josie gripped her arm. "Be careful, girl. Morgan's desperate now. And desperate men are the most dangerous kind." As Kate slipped out the back door of the boarding house, the night seemed darker, the shadows deeper. She hurried through the alleyways, keeping to the edges of town. She was almost at the creek when a figure stepped out from behind a tree, blocking her path. "Well, well," said a familiar voice. "Look who's come back to town." Silas Morgan stood. Before her, a pistol in his hand, two of his men flanking him. "Did you really think that disguise would fool anyone?" he asked, gesturing to her shawl-covered head. "I've had men watching the boarding house since you sent that telegram." Kate's hand inched toward her hidden pistol, but Morgan noticed the movement. "I wouldn't," he warned. "My men are excellent shots, even in the dark." "What do you want, Morgan?" He smiled coldly. "What I've always wanted. Your uncle's mine. Or rather, the rights he stole from me." "He didn't steal anything. He filed legal claims." "Ah, so you found the documents in Sacramento?" Morgan nodded as if confirming a suspicion. "That saves us some time. Hand them over and I might let you leave town alive." "I don't have them with me," Kate lied. Morgan sighed. "That's unfortunate, for you and for your cowboy friend." He gestured to one of his men. "Show her." The man stepped forward, holding up a familiar worn hat, Luke's hat. "Where is he?" Kate demanded, her heart racing. "What have you done with him?" "Nothing, yet." Morgan's smile widened. "He's currently enjoying my hospitality at the mine, along with that old fool Jenkins. They put up quite a fight when my men found them, but eventually saw reason." Kate's mind raced. If Morgan had Luke and Jenkins, what about Turner's men? Had they been captured too, or worse? "You're bluffing," she said, trying to buy time. "Luke wouldn't be taken so easily." Morgan reached into his pocket and pulled out something that made Kate's heart sink, the small tin of coffee Luke had first left on her doorstep. "Found this among his things," Morgan said. "Quite sentimental of him to keep it." He tossed it at her feet. "Now, here's how this is going to work. You're going to take me to those documents. Then you're going to sign over your uncle's claim." "To me? Do that and your friends live. Refuse and—" He shrugged. "Well, mining accidents happen all the time." Kate saw no choice. She had to play along, at least until she could figure out a way to turn the tables. "The documents are hidden near the mine," she said. "I'll take you there." Morgan gestured with his pistol. "After you, Miss Monroe. And remember, any tricks and your cowboy dies first." As they walked through the darkness toward the mine, Kate's mind worked furiously. She had to assume Turner's men had been captured or killed. She was on her own with Luke's life hanging in the balance. The mine came into view, lanterns burning outside the entrance. More of Morgan's men stood guard, and Kate could see figures inside the cabin. "Bring them out," Morgan ordered as they approached. Two men emerged from the cabin, dragging Luke between them. His face was bruised, blood trickling from a cut above. But his gaze was clear and alert. When he saw Kate, his eyes widened in alarm. "Kate, run!" he shouted, struggling against his captors. One of the men struck him hard across the face, silencing him. "Stop it!" Kate cried out. "I'll give you what you want. Just don't hurt him anymore." Morgan smiled triumphantly. "I knew you'd be reasonable. Now the documents." "They're hidden in a cache near the second fork in the mine," Kate said. "I need a lantern to show you." Morgan nodded to one of his men, who handed her a lit lantern. "Lead the way, and remember, your cowboy stays here as insurance." Kate's eyes met Luke's for a brief moment. She tried to convey a message of hope, of determination. His slight nod told her he understood. Inside the mine, Kate led Morgan and two of his men along the main shaft. Her mind raced ahead, trying to formulate a plan. The second fork was where she and Luke had discovered the rich gold vein, and where they had escaped through the hidden side passage when Morgan's men had surprised them before. "How much further?" Morgan demanded, his voice echoing in the tunnel. "Just ahead," Kate replied, slowing her pace. "At the chamber where the main vein is visible." They reached the chamber, the lantern light reflecting off the gold embedded in the walls. Morgan's eyes gleamed with avarice. "Where are they hidden?" he asked, looking around the chamber. Kate pointed to the pile of rocks where they had found the metal box. "Under there, but the rocks are heavy. I'll need help moving them." Morgan gestured to his men. "Help her." As the men moved forward to shift the rocks, Kate edged closer to the hidden side passage. "Just a few more steps out, there's nothing here," one of the men said, having moved the rocks aside. Morgan's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What game are you playing, Miss Monroe?" "No game," Kate said, taking another step backward. "I must have remembered wrong. Maybe it was the other fork." "Enough!" Morgan raised his pistol. "No more delays. Tell me where the documents are, or I'll put a bullet in you right now and deal with your cowboy next." Kate's hand closed around a loose rock from the wall. "They're right here," she said, and threw the rock at the lantern held by one of Morgan's men. The lantern shattered, plunging the chamber into darkness. Kate dove for the side passage, crawling through as fast as she could while behind her. Morgan and his men shouted in confusion. "After her!" Morgan roared. "Don't let her escape." Kate raced through the narrow passage, remembering the way from before. Behind her, she could hear Morgan's men trying to follow, but the passage was too small for them to move quickly. She emerged from the hidden exit, gasping for breath. The night air was cool on her face as she oriented herself. She was on the opposite side of the hill from the cabin where Luke was being held. A gunshot echoed from the direction of the cabin, then another. Shouts and the sounds of a struggle carried through the night air. Kate hesitated. Running might be safer, but she couldn't leave Luke. Decision made, she circled around the hill, keeping to the shadows. As she approached the cabin, a surprising sight greeted her. Turner's men, supposedly captured, were engaged in a fierce gunfight with Morgan's guards, and in the midst of it all was Luke, somehow free of his bonds, fighting alongside them. One of Turner's men spotted her and called out, "Miss Monroe, over here." She ran toward him, ducking as a bullet whizzed past her head. "What happened?" she asked, crouching behind a boulder with him. "Ambush," he explained quickly. "We were waiting in the hills when Morgan's men brought in Merrick and the..." "Hold, man, we've been biding our time for the right moment to strike. And that moment is now," he grinned. "Merrick gave the signal when he saw you were clear of the mine." Kate looked toward the cabin again, where Luke was now taking cover behind an overturned cart. Their eyes met across the distance, and he nodded once, a grim smile on his bloodied face. "Morgan's still in the mine," Kate told Turner's man. "He'll be coming out the main entrance any minute. We've got men covering it, he won't get far." The gunfight intensified, with Morgan's men gradually being forced back toward the mine entrance. Kate could see that Turner's forces had the upper hand. They were better trained, more disciplined. Suddenly a shout went up from near the mine. "Morgan's making a run for it." Kate saw him then, emerging from the mine entrance, pistol in hand, heading for a horse tethered nearby. Two of his men provided covering fire as he mounted. Without thinking, Kate broke from her cover, running toward him. She couldn't let him escape, not after everything he'd done. 3 months had passed since the shootout at the mine. Bright Hollow was a different town now. With Silas Morgan and his men behind bars awaiting trial in Carson City, a new sheriff had been appointed, one who couldn't be bought. Turner's mining company had established operations at the Gold Nugget mine, bringing jobs and prosperity to the area, and Catherine Monroe, once viewed with suspicion as an outsider, was now respected as one of the town's most prominent citizens. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of her new office in town. No more rented room above the general store. Kate now owned a proper building on Main Street, where she managed her business affairs. Josie Adams sat across from her, sipping tea. "You've done well for yourself, girl. Frank would be proud." Kate smiled, setting down the ledger she'd been reviewing. "I hope so. I'm trying to honor his wishes, using the gold for something good. The new schoolhouse certainly qualifies," Josie nodded approvingly. "And that medical clinic you're funding." "The town needed both," Kate said simply. "And there's plenty of gold to go around." "Speaking of going around," Josie's eyes twinkled, "I saw Luke Merrick's new corral on my way here. Quite the operation he's building." Kate felt a familiar warmth at the mention of Luke's name. He has a good eye for horses. The breeding stock he brought in from California is the finest in the territory. "And how are things between you two?" Josie asked with the directness of an old friend. "The whole town's been wondering when you'll make it official." "Make what official?" Kate tried to sound innocent, but the blush in her cheeks gave her away. Josie laughed. "Don't play coy with me, Catherine Monroe. That man looks at you like you hung the moon and you're not much better. The partnership papers you two signed might cover the business arrangements, but everyone knows there's more to it than that." Kate sighed, giving up the pretense. "It's complicated, Josie. Luke and we've been through a lot together, but we're both so busy with our new ventures." "Too busy for happiness," Josie shook her head. "Life's shorter than you think, girl. My Harold and I waited too long to say what was in our hearts. Don't make the same mistake." Before Kate could respond, the door opened and Luke himself walked. And he looked different these days, less weathered, more prosperous. His clothes were new, though still practical, and he'd taken to wearing a silver watch chain across his vest. "Ladies," he greeted them, tipping his hat. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all." Josie rose with a knowing smile. "I was just leaving. Got to check on my boarders." She patted Kate's hand and gave Luke a pointed look before departing. "What was that about?" Luke asked, settling into the chair Josie had vacated. "Just Josie being Josie," Kate replied. "How's the new stock settling in?" "Good. That Appaloosa stallion is everything the breeder promised. Strong bloodlines, good temperament." His eyes held Kate's. "Thought you might want to come see him later." "I'd like that." She closed her ledger. "I could use a break from numbers." Luke nodded toward the book. "Business good?" "Very. The first shipment from the mine exceeded expectations. Turner says the vein is holding strong." She tilted her head, studying him. "And you, the horse business treating you well?" "Can't complain." A smile touched his lips. "Though I miss the quiet sometimes. Being a successful businessman wasn't exactly what I had in mind when I came to Bright Hollow." "What did you have in mind?" "Peace," he said simply. "A place to call my own, horses to work with." His gaze softened. "Didn't expect to find myself in the middle of a gold war, or to meet someone like you." The air between them seemed to thicken, with unspoken words. It had been this way for months. A tension, a warmth, a promise neither had fully acknowledged. Kate cleared her throat. "Jenkins stopped by earlier. Says the federal prosecutor wants him in Carson City next week to testify at Morgan's trial." Luke frowned. "He going alone?" I offered to accompany him. He's still not fully recovered from that beating Morgan's men gave him. "I'll go with you," Luke said immediately. "It's not safe. Morgan still has friends." "Turner's sending 2 of his men as well," Kate assured him. "But I'd welcome your company." The bell above the door jingled as a young boy entered, clutching an envelope. "Telegram for Miss Monroe," he announced. Kate thanked him and gave him a coin before opening the message. Her face paled as she read it. "What is it?" Luke asked, instantly alert. "It's from Turner," she said, her voice tight. "Morgan escaped during transport to the courthouse. He's on the run." Luke was on his feet in an instant. "When?" "Yesterday. They've organized a search party, but..." She looked up at him, fear in her eyes for the first time in months. "He swore he'd come back for us." "Luke, for me, he won't get near you," Luke promised. his hand moving to the pistol he still wore despite his new status as a businessman. "I'll alert the sheriff. Get some men together." What if he comes here? To the mine? Then we'll be ready for him. Luke's voice was hard. "We beat him once, Kate. We'll do it again." The news of Morgan's escape spread through Bright Hollow like wildfire. By evening, the sheriff had organized patrols, and Turner's men at the mine had doubled the guard. Luke insisted on staying at Kate's house that night, sleeping on the sofa in her front room, despite her protests that she could take care of herself. "I know you can," he said as he checked the locks on her windows. "But humor me. Kate's house was a modest but comfortable dwelling on the edge of town, close enough to her office to be convenient, but far enough to offer some privacy. She had purchased it with the first profits from the mine, refusing the larger, more ostentatious homes that had been offered to her. "You don't have to do this," she said, watching Luke arrange his makeshift bed on the sofa. "Yes, I do." He looked up at her, his eyes serious. "I wasn't there when your uncle needed protection. I won't make the same mistake with you." "That wasn't your fault," Kate said softly. "You didn't even know Uncle Frank. But I know you." He stood, crossing the room to where she stood. "And I can't lose you, Kate." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Kate felt her heart quicken. "Luke," she began, but he shook his head. "Get some rest," he said, stepping back. "Morning comes early." Reluctantly, she went to her bedroom, leaving the door slightly ajar. Sleep was elusive, her mind racing with thoughts of Morgan and what he might do. And beneath that fear, a different kind of tension, the awareness of Luke's presence just a few feet away, the words they still hadn't spoken to each other. Dawn was just breaking when a sound woke her. Soft creak from the front room. Kate sat up, listening. Another creak, then silence. "Luke?" she called softly. No answer. Carefully, she slid out of bed, reaching for the pistol she kept in her bedside drawer. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Luke should have answered, heart pounding. She approached her bedroom door. It was still ajar just as she had left it. She peered out into the dimly lit front room. The sofa was empty, the blankets Luke had used thrown aside. No sign of him. "Luke!" she called again, louder this time. A groan from the floor behind the sofa answered her. Kate rushed forward, pistol ready. Luke lay on the floor, blood seeping from a wound on his head. He was conscious but dazed. "Luke, what happened?" She knelt beside him, checking the wound. "Someone at the window," he managed. "Went to check." Then nothing. A cold voice from the doorway froze Kate in place. "Touching reunion, but I'm afraid I'll have to cut it short." Silas. Morgan stood there, looking thinner and harder than before. His right arm was in a sling, the shoulder Luke had shot during their last encounter, but his left hand held a pistol pointed steadily at Kate. "Morgan," she said, slowly rising to her feet, keeping her own pistol hidden in the folds of her nightgown, Miss Monroe. He smiled coldly. "You've done well for yourself. My mine producing nicely, is it?" "It was never your mine," she replied, trying to keep him talking while she assessed the situation. Luke was hurt but conscious, struggling to sit up. The front door was blocked by Morgan, but the back door through the kitchen might offer an escape. "Details." Morgan waved his pistol dismissively. "I built Bright Hollow. Everything here was mine. Until you arrived." "You murdered my uncle," Kate said, her voice hard. "Business," Morgan shrugged. "He found something valuable and wouldn't share. A poor decision on his part." Luke had managed to sit up, his hand pressed to his bleeding head. "You won't get away with this, Morgan. The whole town's looking for you, which is why we won't be staying." Morgan gestured with his pistol toward Kate. "Miss Monroe and I are going for a little ride. To the mine. There's something there I still need." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Kate declared. Morgan's smile vanished. "Yes, you are. Unless you want me to put a bullet in your cowboy's head right now." Kate felt her blood run cold. She couldn't risk Luke's life. "Don't do it, Kate," Luke said, his eyes meeting hers. "He'll kill us both anyway." "Probably," Morgan agreed. "But at least one of you can have a few more hours of life. Your choice, Miss Monroe. Come quietly or watch him die right now." Kate's mind raced. She still had her hidden pistol. If she could distract Morgan for just a moment. "If I go with you," she said slowly, "what guarantee do I have that you won't hurt Luke?" "None at all," Morgan replied honestly, "but it's the only chance he's got." Luke tried to stand, but Morgan kicked him hard in the ribs, sending him back to the floor with a grunt of pain. "Stop it," Kate cried out. "I'll go with you." "Just don't hurt him anymore." Morgan smiled triumphantly. "Wise decision. Now hands where I can see them." Kate reluctantly raised her hands, the pistol still hidden in the folds of her nightgown. If she revealed it now, Morgan would shoot without hesitation. "Let's go," Morgan said, gesturing toward the door. "My horse is out back." As he motioned for her to walk ahead of him, Kate caught Luke's eye. There was a message there, a plea, a warning. "I'll be all right," she told him softly. "Find Turner." Morgan prodded her with the pistol. "Enough talk, move." They went through the kitchen to the back door. Outside, a horse was indeed waiting, saddled and ready. "Get on," Morgan ordered. Kate hesitated. "I'm in my nightgown." "A pity." "I'm sure, but we don't have time for a fashion show." He gestured impatiently with the pistol. "On the horse now." Kate mounted, awkwardly arranging her nightgown around her legs. Morgan kept his pistol trained on her as he mounted behind her, his injured arm making the process difficult, but not impossible. "One sound," he warned, pressing the pistol into her side, "and it will be your last." With that, he kicked the horse into motion, heading away from town toward the hills where the mine lay. Inside the house, Luke dragged himself to his feet, fighting the dizziness from the blow to his head. He staggered to the front door, flinging it open. "Help!" he shouted. Into the early morning streets. "Someone help!" A neighbor emerged from a nearby house, alarmed by the commotion. "Morgan," Luke gasped. "He's taken Kate. Get the sheriff." While the neighbor ran to alert the sheriff, Luke stumbled back inside, searching for his boots and gun belt. His pistol was gone. Morgan must have taken it, but he kept a spare in his saddlebags. By the time the sheriff arrived, Luke had managed to saddle his horse, despite the pounding in his head and the pain in his ribs. "He's taking her to the mine," Luke told the sheriff. "We need to gather men, head them off." "You're in no condition to ride," the sheriff objected, noting Luke's bloodied head. "Try and stop me," Luke growled, mounting his horse with grim determination. The sheriff, seeing the steel in Luke's eyes, nodded. "I'll gather a posse, but don't go charging in alone, Merrick. Morgan's desperate, and that makes him dangerous." "I know exactly how dangerous he is," Luke replied, turning his horse toward the mine. "That's why every minute counts." The road to the mine seemed endless. Kate sat rigidly in front of Morgan, the pistol pressed against her back, a constant reminder of her precarious situation. She had managed to keep her own pistol hidden, waiting for the right moment to use it. "Why the mine?" she asked, hoping to distract him. "You must know it's guarded." "Not the main entrance," Morgan said. "There's another way in. The passage you used to escape me before." Kate's heart sank. Of course he would have found it eventually. "And what's at the mine that's worth risking your neck for?" "The gold is being shipped out regularly," Morgan chuckled darkly. "Not all of it. Your uncle had a secret cache, a place where he kept the richest ore separate from the rest. I found references to it in his personal papers, but never the location." "And you think I know where it is?" "I think you have access to all his documents now, and I think you'll help me find it if you want to live." They reached the hills near the mine, Morgan steering the horse away from the main road, following. A narrow trail that led around to the back side of the mountain. "Turner's men will be looking for you," Kate said. "They patrol these hills." "They patrol the obvious approaches," Morgan countered. "Not this old game trail. Now be quiet." They rode in silence for another half-hour before Morgan reined in the horse near a cluster of boulders. In the distance, Kate could see the main entrance to the mine, with guards visible even from here. "This way," Morgan dismounted, keeping the pistol trained on Kate as she did the same. "The hidden entrance should be just beyond those rocks." He prodded her forward, staying close behind. Kate measured her steps carefully, looking for any opportunity to use her hidden weapon. But Morgan was cautious, keeping enough distance that she couldn't turn quickly without being shot. They reached the hidden entrance, now partially cleared of brush, making it more visible than before. "Inside," Morgan ordered. "And remember, one wrong move and you die." The passage was as narrow as Kate remembered, forcing them to move single file. This was her chance. With Morgan behind her, unable to see her hands in the dim light, she could retrieve her pistol. Slowly, carefully, she drew the weapon from the folds of her nightgown. The passage widened slightly as they approached the main chamber. Just a few more steps. "Stop," Morgan commanded suddenly. "Turn around slowly and drop whatever you're holding." Kate froze. Had he seen the pistol? I said, "Turn around." Slowly she obeyed, keeping the pistol pressed against her leg, out of sight. Morgan stood a few feet away, his pistol leveled at her chest. "You think I didn't notice you carrying something? Hand it over now." Kate raised the pistol in one swift motion. "Drop your weapon, Morgan." For a moment they stood in a deadlock, each pointing a gun at the other in the dim light of the passage. Morgan's lips curled in a sneer. "You won't shoot. Not at this range. We'd both die." "I'm willing to take that chance," Kate replied steadily. "Are you?" A tense silence stretched between them. Then, unexpectedly, Morgan laughed. "You've got spirit, Miss Monroe, I'll give you that." He lowered his pistol slightly. "Perhaps we can come to an arrangement. The only arrangement is you dropping your weapon and surrendering," Kate said. "The law will deal with you." "The law," Morgan spat. "The law's for the weak. Men like me make our own rules." "Not anymore," came a voice from behind Kate. She didn't dare turn, but she recognized Luke's voice instantly. "Drop it, Morgan," Luke continued. "It's over." Morgan's eyes darted between Kate and the unseen figure behind her, his face twisted with rage and desperation. "Never," he snarled, and raised his pistol. Two shots rang out simultaneously, Kate's and Luke's. Morgan staggered backward, blood blooming on his chest from two wounds. His pistol clattered to the ground as he fell. "Kate!" Luke rushed forward, pulling her into his arms. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, trembling now that the danger had passed. "How did you find us?" "I know these hills," he said simply. "And I know you. Figured Morgan would try the hidden entrance." He looked down at the fallen man. "Is he—" Kate knelt beside Morgan, checking for signs of life. His eyes were open but unseeing, his chest still. "He's gone," she said quietly. More voices echoed from the passage, the sheriff and his men following Luke's trail. "In here," Luke called out. "We've got Morgan." The next hours passed in a blur. The sheriff took statements, Morgan's body was removed, and the mine was secured once more. Kate, still in her nightgown with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, sat with Luke outside the cabin, while a doctor examined his head wound. "You need stitches," the doctor declared, "and rest. Those ribs might be cracked." Luke winced as the doctor cleaned the wound. "I'll rest when I know everything's secure." "It is," the sheriff assured him, approaching with a cup of coffee for Kate. "Morgan worked alone on this one. His former men are still locked up in Carson City." "What about the secret cache he mentioned?" Kate asked, sipping the hot coffee gratefully. The sheriff shrugged. "If it exists, it's legally yours anyway. Something to look into when things settle down." After the doctor finished with Luke and the sheriff's men departed, Kate and Luke were left alone at the cabin. Turner's men had returned to their posts, giving them privacy. "You should go home, get some rest," Luke said, touching his bandaged head gingerly. "So should you," Kate replied. "But I'm not ready to go back to that house yet." Luke nodded in understanding. "You can stay at my place tonight. It's safe. What about you?" "I'll bunk with one of the hands, there's plenty of room." Kate studied his face, the bruises forming, the lines of pain and exhaustion. Yet beneath it all, the same strength and steadiness that had drawn her to him from the beginning. "Luke," she said softly, "we need to talk." He met her gaze. "About what?" "About us. This partnership we've created." A guarded look came into his eyes. "What about it?" Kate took a deep breath. "Josie says the whole town is wondering when we'll make it official." "Josie talks too much," Luke muttered, but a hint of a smile touched his lips. "She's not wrong, though." Kate set down her coffee cup. "We've been dancing around this for months, ever since that night in the hunting cabin." Luke was silent for a moment, his eyes never leaving hers. "I didn't want to rush you," he said finally. "You've been through a lot. Building your business, dealing with the mine. And you've been right beside me through all of it." She moved closer to him on the bench, not asking for anything in return, just being there. Where else would I be? The question was simple, honest. Kate reached out, taking his hand in hers. I don't know what the future holds, Luke. The gold won't last forever. People will come and go from Bright Hollow. But there's one thing I'm sure of. What's that? I want you in my future, not just as a business partner, as... She hesitated, suddenly uncertain of the words. Luke squeezed her hand gently. As what, Kate? The tenderness in his voice gave her courage. As my husband, if you'll have me. For a moment Luke looked stunned. Then a slow, warm smile spread across his face. Kate Monroe, he said, his voice husky with emotion. Are you proposing to me? A laugh bubbled up from her chest, surprising them both. I suppose I am. Is that improper? Completely scandalous, he agreed, pulling her closer. The whole town will talk. Let them, she whispered, just before his lips met hers in a kiss that had been months in the making. When they finally broke apart, Luke rested his forehead gently against hers, mindful of his wound. Yes, he said, simply. Yes, I'll marry you, Catherine Monroe. Even though I'm stubborn and headstrong and own a gold mine, especially because of those things. His eyes crinkled with amusement. Though I'm not sure which is more dangerous, the gold or your stubbornness. You'll have a lifetime to find out, she promised, as the sun began to set over the hills of Bright Hollow, casting the gold nugget mine in a warm golden glow. Kate and Luke sat together, planning a future neither could have imagined when they first met. The gold had brought them together, but it was something far more precious that would keep them that way. A partnership forged in fire, tempered by danger, and now, finally, sealed with love. 2 weeks later, Kate stood in Josie's parlor, wearing a simple white dress. No elaborate wedding gown for her, that wasn't her style. But she had conceded to Josie's insistence on flowers, and now held a small bouquet of wildflowers gathered from the hills around Bright Hollow. You look beautiful, Josie declared, adjusting a stray lock of Kate's hair. Luke won't know what hit him. Kate smiled nervously. Is everyone here? Half the town, I reckon. Plus Turner and his men, and even that lawyer from Sacramento who handled your partnership papers. Josie gave Kate's shoulders a reassuring squeeze. Ready? With a deep breath, Kate nodded. Ready? The ceremony was being held in the town square, beneath an arch of flowers and greenery erected for the occasion. As Kate walked toward it, escorted by Jenkins, who had insisted on the honor, she saw the gathered crowd, familiar faces from around town, miners from the Gold Nugget, hands from Luke's horse ranch. And at the center, waiting beneath the arch, was Luke. He wore a new black suit, his usually unruly hair neatly combed, his face clean-shaven. But it was his eyes that caught and held Kate's attention, warm, steady, and filled with a love that made her heart skip. The preacher spoke the traditional words, but Kate barely heard them. All she could focus on was Luke's hand holding hers, his voice as he spoke his vows. I, Luke Merrick, take you, Catherine Monroe, as my wife, he said, his voice clear and strong. I promise to stand beside you, not in front of you or behind you, but as your equal partner in all things, to support your dreams as you have supported mine, to protect what we build together, and to love you, in good times and bad, for all the days of my life. When it was her turn, Kate's voice trembled slightly, but her words were no less sincere. I, Catherine Monroe, take you, Luke Merrick, as my husband. I promise to trust you with my heart, as I have trusted you with my life, to build a future with you that honors those who came before us, to be your partner in peace and in fire, and to love you steadfastly and completely for all the days of my life. The exchange of rings, simple gold bands, forged from the first, or pulled from the gold nugget under Kate's ownership, sealed their vows. And when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that went up from the crowd could probably be heard all the way to Carson City. The celebration that followed lasted well into the night. There was music and dancing, food and drink, stories and laughter. Kate and Luke moved through it all in a happy daze, accepting congratulations and well wishes from everyone. Did I tell you, Turner said as he shook Luke's hand, that the assay from the new shaft came back yesterday. Richest ore yet. Today's not about the gold, Luke replied with a smile, his arm around Kate's waist. Turner laughed. No, I suppose it isn't, but it's good news all the same. As the evening wore on, Kate found herself drawn away from the festivities, toward the edge of town where the hills rose in silhouette against the starry sky. In the distance, she could just make out the shape of the head frame at the gold nugget mine. Luke joined her, slipping his arm around her shoulders. Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Merrick. The new name made her smile. Just thinking about Uncle Frank, wondering if he somehow knew how this would all turn out. What do you mean? In his letter he said, the gold shouldn't change me. She leaned into Luke's embrace. And in a way it didn't. But it changed everything else. Brought you into my life. Gave Bright Hollow a second chance. Luke considered this. Maybe the gold was just the tool, not the purpose. Your uncle knew you were strong enough to handle it the right way. We handled it, Kate corrected gently. Together. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the mine to manage, Luke's horse breeding operation to expand, their new shared home to settle into, but tonight was just for them. Did you ever find it? Luke asked suddenly. The secret cache Morgan was, so desperate to locate. Kate's lips curved in a mysterious smile. Maybe. Maybe. Luke raised an eyebrow. That's all I get? She turned to face him, looping her arms around his neck. Some treasures are meant to be discovered together. When the time is right, is that a promise, Mrs. Merrick? It's a guarantee, Mr. Merrick. She rose on tiptoes to kiss him, the sounds of celebration floating on the night air around them. Behind them, Bright Hollow glowed with lantern light and possibility. Before them, the hills held their secrets and promises, and between them, something more precious than gold had been found and claimed, a love as enduring as the mountains themselves. 1 year had passed since Kate and Luke's wedding. Bright Hollow had grown from a rough mining town into a prosperous community. New buildings lined Main Street, including a proper schoolhouse, a medical clinic, and even a small theater for traveling shows. The gold nugget mine continued to produce, though not at the spectacular levels of its first year. Turner's company had expanded operations to neighboring claims, creating more jobs and bringing more families to the area. Luke's horse breeding business had flourished beyond expectation. His Appaloosas were now sought after throughout the territory, known for their strength, intelligence, and steady temperament. And the Merrick home, built on a gentle slope overlooking both the town and the distant mountains, had become a welcoming, gathering place for friends and neighbors. On this particular morning, Kate stood on the front porch watching the sunrise with a cup of coffee in her hands. At 27, she had grown into her role as one of Bright Hollow's leading citizens with grace and confidence. Her short hair had grown out a bit, now falling in soft waves to her shoulders, and the simple calico dress she wore was a far cry from the borrowed clothes she'd arrived in. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn. Luke was returning from his early morning ride, his favorite stallion cantering easily up the path to their home. At 29, he had retained the lean strength and quiet confidence that had first drawn her to him, though his face was now more often creased with smile lines than worry. "Morning, beautiful," he called as he dismounted. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," she replied with a smile. "Too much on my mind." Luke climbed the porch steps and kissed her softly. "The land. Deal?" Kate nodded. The town council was considering purchasing a large tract of land to the east for future expansion, and as a council member, Kate had been heavily involved in the negotiations. "Jenkins thinks we're paying too much," she said. "But the alternative is letting the Eastern Mining Consortium get it, and we both know what that would mean." Luke frowned. The consortium was the latest in a series of large companies eyeing Bright Hollow's resources. Unlike Turner's operation, which had worked with the town, the consortium was known for aggressive tactics and little regard for local communities. "We can't let that happen," he agreed. "Not after everything we've built here." Kate leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "Sometimes I think it never ends. First Morgan, now these corporate vultures." The difference is this time we're not facing them alone. Luke wrapped his arm around her shoulders. The whole town stands together now. It was true, Bright Hollow had developed a strong sense of community and purpose over the past year. Much of that was due to Kate's leadership and the example she and Luke had set with their business practices. "I have news," Luke said, changing the subject. "Jacob Wilson's mare finally foaled last night. A strong colt with perfect markings." Kate smiled. Luke's enthusiasm for his horses always warmed her heart. "That's wonderful. Will you be going over there today?" "This afternoon." He studied her face. "You still look tired. Are you feeling all right?" "Just busy," she assured him. "Between the council meetings, the mine reports, and planning for the town's anniversary celebration next month, I haven't had much time to rest." Luke's concerned expression didn't fade. "Maybe you should see Dr. Bennett. You've been tired a lot lately." Kate avoided his eyes. "I'm fine, really." "Kate." His voice was gentle but firm. "What aren't you telling me?" She sighed. They had promised never to keep secrets from each other. "I already saw Dr. Bennett last week." Luke's hand tightened on her shoulder. "And?" A slow smile spread across Kate's face as she finally met his gaze. "And it seems the Merrick family will be growing this winter." For a moment, Luke simply stared at her, processing her words. Then his face transformed with joy. "A baby," he whispered. "We're having a baby?" Kate nodded, her own eyes filling with happy tears. "Around December, Dr. Bennett thinks." Luke let out a whoop that probably startled the horses in the distant corral. He lifted Kate off her feet, spinning her around before setting her down carefully. Suddenly concerned. "Should I not have done that? I didn't hurt you, did I?" Kate laughed. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass. But maybe save the spinning for later months." Luke placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach, wonder in his eyes. "A baby," he repeated. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Kate asked, though the answer was written all over his face. Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He kissed her deeply. "I love you, Catherine Merrick, more than I ever thought possible." "I love you too." She leaned her forehead against his. "Though I'm a little terrified, if I'm being honest. I don't know the first thing about being a mother. And I don't know anything about being a father," Luke admitted. "But we'll figure it out together, that's what we do." They stood there on the porch, holding each other as the morning sun bathed their home in golden light. It was a perfect moment. One Kate wished she could preserve forever, but life in Bright Hollow rarely stayed peaceful for long. The sound of an approaching horse broke the moment. Turner's foreman, Mike Davis, was riding hard up the path to their house. Luke stepped forward, instantly alert. "Mike, what's wrong?" The foreman reined in, his face grim. "There's been a cave-in at the north shaft. 3 men trapped." Kate felt her blood run cold. The north shaft was the newest and deepest part of the gold nugget mine. "How bad?" Luke demanded, already moving toward the stable to saddle his horse. "Bad enough," Mike replied. "Turner sent me to get you. Said we need all hands." Kate followed. Luke to the stable. "I'm coming too." Luke paused in saddling his horse. "Kate, in your condition—" "Those are our men, Luke," she cut him off. "Our responsibility. I'm coming." He knew better than to argue when she used that tone. Within minutes they were both mounted and following Mike down the path toward the mine. The scene at the Gold Nugget was controlled chaos. Turner had organized the miners into rescue teams, with some clearing debris from the shaft entrance, while others prepared support beams to shore up the damaged tunnel. "Luke, Kate," Turner greeted them with visible relief. "Thank God you're here." "What happened?" Kate dismounted, taking in the frantic activity around the mine entrance. "Looks like a support beam failed in the north shaft," Turner explained. "The section near the new vein collapsed. Jenkins was down there with 2 younger miners, showing them how to properly shore up a new tunnel." Luke's expression hardened. "Jenkins? He's supposed to be retired from underground work." "Try telling him that," Turner sighed. "You know how he is. Wanted to make sure the young ones learned the right way." Kate's heart ached at the thought of the old miner trapped in the darkness. Jenkins had become like family to them, a link to Uncle Frank and the early days of her time in Bright Hollow. "Have you made contact?" she asked. Turner shook his head. "Not yet. But we've got men clearing a path now. If they're behind that fall, we'll reach them. Luke was already removing his jacket. I'm going in with the rescue team. Kate wanted to object, but knew it would be useless. Luke was the strongest man in town and one of the few with experience in mine rescue from his younger days. Be careful, she said instead, squeezing his hand. Remember, you're going to be a father. He kissed her quickly. I'll remember, and I'll bring them out. As Luke joined the rescue team, Kate turned to Turner. What can I do? Help organize the medical supplies, he suggested. Dr. Bennett is on his way, but we'll need bandages, water, and blankets ready when we get them out. For the next several hours, Kate worked alongside the miners' wives and other townspeople who had come to help. A tent was set up near the mine entrance, with medical supplies, food, and water for the rescuers who emerged in shifts, exhausted and dust-covered. Josie Adams arrived with a wagon of supplies from town. Any word? She asked as she handed Kate a stack of clean bandages. Nothing yet, Kate replied, trying to keep the worry from her voice. Luke's been in there for 3 hours now. Josie squeezed her arm. If anyone can find them, it's your husband. That man's as stubborn as you are. Despite her concern, Kate smiled at that. High praise coming from you. As the sun began to set, lanterns were lit around the mine entrance. The mood among the waiting crowd grew more somber with each passing hour. Dr. Bennett had arrived and prepared a treatment area for when the trapped men were found. Kate paced anxiously, one hand unconsciously resting on her stomach. The future she and Luke had just been celebrating that morning now seemed fragile, uncertain. A shout from the mine entrance made everyone freeze. One of the rescue team members emerged, his face split with a grin despite the exhaustion evident. In his posture, "We found them," he announced. "They're alive." A cheer went up from the gathered crowd. Kate rushed forward. "All of them? Are they injured?" "Jenkins has a broken leg and one of the young fellows took a nasty hit to the head. The third one seems okay, just shaken up." The miner wiped sweat from his brow. "They're bringing them out now. Luke's with them." Relief washed over Kate like a physical force. She turned to Dr. Bennett. "They'll need you ready." The doctor nodded. "We're prepared." It took another hour to carefully extract the trapped miners. Jenkins came out first, carried on a makeshift stretcher, his weathered face pale with pain, but his eyes alert. "Sorry for the trouble, Miss Kate," he called out when he saw her, using the old name he'd never quite abandoned despite her marriage. "Save your strength, old man," she replied with affection, walking alongside his stretcher as they carried him to the medical tent. The next miner, a young man named Thomas, who had only been working at the Gold Nugget for a few months, was unconscious, a bloody bandage wrapped around his head. Dr. Bennett immediately took charge of his care. Finally, the third miner emerged, walking with support from another rescuer. And behind them, covered in dust and looking exhausted but unharmed, was Luke. Kate rushed to him, throwing her arms around him despite his filthy state. "You did it," she whispered against his neck. Luke held her tight. It was close. Another hour and the whole tunnel might have come down. Later, after the injured miners had been stabilized and transported to town, and the cleanup efforts at the mine had been organized for the next day, Kate and Luke finally headed home. They were both exhausted, but grateful that what could have been a tragedy had ended relatively well. "Jenkins will be laid up for weeks with that leg," Luke said as they settled into their bedroom. "And he's not happy about it." "He's lucky to be alive," Kate replied, brushing out her hair. "They all are." Luke sat on the edge of the bed, watching her. It made me think, being down there in the darkness, about what matters, about the baby. Kate set down her brush, turning to face him. "What about the baby? I want our child to have a safer life than we've had," he said simply. "Less danger, more security." "We've built that security," Kate reminded him. "The mine, your horses, our place in this town. But at what cost?" Luke ran a hand through his still dusty hair. "Today was a reminder of how quickly it can all go wrong. The mine will always be dangerous, Kate, no matter how careful we are." She moved to sit beside him, taking his hand. "What are you saying?" "Maybe it's time to consider scaling back our involvement with the Gold Nugget. Let Turner take over more of the operations. Focus on the horse business, which is safer and more sustainable in the long run." Kate was quiet for a moment, considering his words. The mine had been her connection to Uncle Frank, her first step toward independence in Bright Hollow, but Luke wasn't wrong about the dangers. "I'll think about it," she promised. "But not tonight. Tonight I'm just grateful you're home safe." Luke pulled her into his arms, his hand finding its way to her stomach again. "Home safe, with both of you." The next few months brought changes to Bright Hollow and to the Merrick's life. The town council, with Kate's strong advocacy, purchased the Eastern Land Tract, securing it for future growth. The Eastern Mining Consortium made threats of legal action, but eventually backed down when faced with the unified front of the townspeople. Luke expanded his horse-breeding operation, hiring 2 more hands to help with the increasing workload. His reputation for quality stock continued to grow, bringing buyers from as far away as San Francisco, and as summer turned to fall, Kate's pregnancy became more visible. She glowed with health and happiness, though she did reduce her hours at the mine office, gradually turning over more responsibility to Turner's company, as she and Luke had discussed. Jenkins, true to form, refused to stay idle even with his broken leg. From a chair on the Merrick's porch, he supervised the construction of a nursery addition to their home, offering constant and often unsolicited advice to the carpenters. "It needs to face east," he insisted one afternoon as Luke reviewed the plans, "so the little one gets the morning sun." Luke exchanged an amused glance with Kate. "Is that so?" "Absolutely," Jenkins nodded firmly. "My ma always said babies need sunshine to grow strong, like saplings." Kate smiled, resting a hand on her now prominent belly. "Then east it is." The nursery was completed by early November, a charming room with large windows, facing east, as Jenkins had demanded, a handcrafted crib made by Luke himself, and a rocking chair that had been a gift from Josie. "It's perfect," Kate declared as she surveyed the finished room. "All we need now is the baby." "Any day now," Luke said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands cradling her stomach. As if in response, the baby kicked against his palm, making them both laugh. "Strong," Luke commented. "Takes after its mother, or its father," Kate countered, leaning back against him. "Either way, this child is going to be loved." The first snow of winter came early that year, dusting bright, hollow with white in late November. Kate stood at the window of their bedroom, watching the flakes drift down in the moonlight. Sleep had been elusive lately, with the baby's constant movement and the increasing discomfort of her condition. But she didn't mind these quiet moments. When the world seemed peaceful and full of possibility, a sharp pain made her gasp, her hand flying to her stomach. She waited, wondering if it had been a false alarm. Dr. Bennett had warned her about those. But then another pain came, stronger. "Then the first, Luke," she called, her voice surprisingly steady. "I think it's time." He was instantly awake, moving with the efficiency born of months of preparation. He helped her change into a clean nightgown, then went to saddle a horse to fetch Dr. Bennett. "I'll be back as quick as I can," he promised, kissing her forehead. "Will you be all right for a few minutes?" Kate nodded, settling onto the bed as another contraction began. "I'm not going anywhere." The hours that followed were a blur of pain and determination. Dr. Bennett arrived with his wife, who acted as midwife. Luke was banished to the hallway in accordance with custom, though he protested vigorously. "It's not proper," Mrs. Bennett insisted, closing the bedroom door firmly in his face. Left alone in the hallway, Luke paced like a caged animal, flinching at every cry from behind the door. Jenkins, who had been staying in their guest room during his recovery, hobbled out to join him. "First baby's always the hardest," the old miner offered. "But Miss Kate's strong, she'll be fine." Luke nodded, unable to speak. The waiting was unbearable, each minute stretching like an hour. He had faced armed men, mine cave-ins, and countless dangers without flinching. But this, his wife's pain, and his own helplessness to ease it, was a new kind of torture. Dawn was breaking when a new sound pierced the silence, the thin, indignant wail of a newborn. Luke froze mid-pace, his heart seemingly stopped in his chest. The cry came again, stronger this time. The bedroom door opened and Dr. Bennett emerged, his face tired but smiling. "Congratulations, Mr. Merrick. You have a daughter." A daughter. The word echoed in Luke's mind as he stood rooted to the spot. "And, Kate?" he managed to ask. "Tired but well," the doctor assured him. "She's asking for you." Luke didn't remember moving, but suddenly he was in the bedroom. Mrs. Bennett was cleaning up, but his eyes went straight to the bed where Kate lay propped against pillows, a small bundle cradled in her arms. She looked up at him, exhausted but radiant. "Come meet your daughter." On unsteady legs, Luke approached the bed and sat carefully on its edge. Kate tilted the bundle so he could see the tiny face within, red and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair and tightly closed eyes. "She's perfect," he whispered, gently touching the baby's cheek with one finger. "Just like her mother." Kate smiled. "Would you like to hold her?" Nervously, Luke held out his arms, and Kate carefully transferred their daughter into them. The baby seemed impossibly small against his broad chest, but she settled comfortably, one tiny hand escaping the blanket to curl reflexively around his finger. And in that moment, Luke Merrick, horseman, miner, fighter, was utterly conquered by a being who weighed less than 8 pounds. "What shall we call her?" Kate asked softly. Luke looked from the baby to his wife, overwhelmed with love for them both. "What about Francis? After your uncle?" Tears filled Kate's eyes. "Francis, I like that." She reached out to stroke the baby's head. "Francis Josephine Merrick for Uncle Frank and Josie." "It's perfect," Luke agreed. "Welcome to Bright Hollow, Francis Josephine." The news of Francis's birth spread quickly through town. Over the next few days, a steady stream of visitors came to the Merrick home, bearing gifts and good wishes. Josie Adams wept openly when told of the baby's middle name. Turner brought a silver rattle. Even the miners from the Gold Nugget sent a handcrafted mobile to hang above the crib. But the most meaningful moment came a week after the birth, when Jenkins, his leg nearly healed, presented them with a small wooden box. "What's this?" Kate asked, balancing Francis in one arm as she accepted the box. Jenkins shuffled his feet, suddenly shy. "Something I've been saving, for the right time." Kate opened the box to find a gold locket on a delicate chain. Inside was a tiny portrait of Uncle Frank on one side, and on the other a small golden nugget. "The first piece of gold your uncle ever found in the Gold Nugget mine," Jenkins explained. "He gave it to me for safekeeping years ago, said it brought him luck. Thought maybe it could bring the little one luck too." Tears sprang to Kate's eyes. "Jenkins, this is too precious." "Nonsense," the old miner cut her off gruffly. "Frank would have wanted his great niece to have it. Family heirloom, you might say." Luke, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped forward to clasp Jenkins's shoulder. "Thank you, it means more than you know." As winter settled over Bright Hollow, the Merrick household found a new rhythm centered around baby Francis. Kate, who had feared she wouldn't know how to be a mother, discovered a natural instinct for caring for her daughter. And Luke, to everyone's amusement, became utterly devoted to the tiny girl, spending hours simply watching her sleep. "She's got your eyes," he told Kate one evening as they sat before the fire, Francis nestled between them. "And your stubbornness," Kate replied with a smile. "She already knows exactly what she wants," Luke chuckled. "Heaven help us when she gets older." The peaceful domestic scene was interrupted by a knock at the door. Luke rose to answer it, returning moments later with Turner, whose expression was unusually serious. "Sorry to disturb your evening," Turner said, nodding to Kate. "But there's something you both should know." "What is it?" Luke asked, tension creeping into his voice. Turner took a seat, accepting the coffee Kate offered. "I received a letter today from the federal prosecutor in Carson City. They're finally clearing out Morgan's estate, now that all the legal matters have been settled." Kate felt a chill at the mention of Morgan's name. Though he had been dead for a year, the memory of their final confrontation in the mine still haunted her occasionally. "What does that have to do with us?" she asked. Turner sipped his coffee before answering. Among his personal effects, they found detailed maps of the Gold Nugget mine and correspondence with someone in town, someone who was feeding him information about the mine, about you two, about everything happening in Bright Hollow. Luke's face darkened. "Morgan had an accomplice here, all that time." "Looks that way," Turner nodded grimly. The letters aren't signed with a real name, just a symbol, a drawing of a key. A key, Kate frowned. That doesn't mean anything to me. Me neither, Luke admitted. But it's disturbing to think someone in town was working with Morgan, someone who might still be here. Turner set down his cup. That's why I thought you should know. The prosecutor is sending copies of the letters. Maybe something in them will help identify who it was. After Turner left, an uneasy silence fell over the room. Francis had fallen asleep, oblivious to the adults' concerns. Could it have been the former sheriff? Kate suggested. We already know he was in Morgan's pocket. Luke shook his head. Maybe, but this sounds like someone closer to us. Someone who had access to information about the mine, about our movements. The thought was deeply unsettling. They had built a life in Bright Hollow, established trust with the community. The idea that someone close to them had betrayed that. Trust was painful to contemplate. What do we do? Kate asked, instinctively drawing Francis closer. Luke's expression was resolute. We wait for the letters, see what they reveal. And in the meantime, we're careful. We watch. We protect what's ours. Kate nodded, her gaze dropping to their sleeping daughter. They had overcome so much to build this life together. They would not let an unknown threat destroy it. Whoever it is, she said quietly, they'll regret crossing the Merricks. Luke's smile held a hint of the old danger that had first drawn her to him. Yes, they will. The mystery of Morgan's accomplice would have to wait for another day. For now, they had their home, their town, and most importantly, their daughter. The gold that had brought them together had given them a foundation, but what they had built upon it, trust, love, family, was far more precious. As the fire crackled and snow fell softly outside, Kate looked at her husband and daughter and knew with absolute certainty that this was the richest vein she would ever discover. Gold came and went, but love, true partnership, was the real treasure of Bright Hollow, and it was one that would never run dry. The end.